And a very pleasant good afternoon to everybody. My name is Biff Kensington, and you are tuned in to the Queen City Express podcast here for Thursday, May 17th, 2018. I am, of course, one half of the Queen City Express, and I'm joined, as always, by my co host. He is the best gamer that ever lived, if you count Terraria and maybe a few other games like Warcraft in the mix. Ryan Sio, how you doing, buddy?
You didn't really think that one out really far, did you?
Wasn't that obvious?
It was extremely obvious. But I'm okay. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm tired as all get out, so don't know how long we're going to record today. But the Queen City Express always strives to bring you first-rate content, and so we're going to power through this today. Only got one subject really to talk about this afternoon, and it's a subject that's kind of been in the news here, the wrestling news at least, over the last 24 hours. Neither one of us watched Raw or SmackDown for the most part. I watched the Seth Rollins Kevin Owens match. Ryan, did you get any chance to watch wrestling this week? I'm doubting that you did.
I've seen some clips here and there and read up on it, but I haven't been really watching. I'm kind of in the burned out mode at the moment.
Yeah, I think you and I are both kind of the same mindset when it comes to being burnt out.
I think once the Money in the Bank hits, it'll kind of get me back. But right now, it's kind of like ugh.
Well, see, that's the problem with a lot of these shows is the build up to these shows is so lazy. You've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times. I mean, they always do the same type of build for the Money in the Bank. It's always qualifying matches. You watch in the build up to the Rumble. You know, usually they have qualifying matches for that, or they'll do some sort of beat the clock feature. I don't think they did that this year, but that's been in the past. They'll do a beat the clock to get people specific starting spots in the Rumble. It's just all very recycled, and so there's not a lot of uniqueness to the programming right now. But I mean, hey, if you are up for Jinder Mahal and Roman Reigns, then you're in Nirvana. That was a big angle Monday, and while the actual angle itself, the little kind of street fight type mentality backstage wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. There's just no interest in this feud whatsoever, and that's one of the real problems with WWE programming right now. There's just so little interest in so many of their stories. But you know, it is what it is, really.
I'm just it was the most unlikely of face turns.
Is it really a face turn, or are they both just going to be booed out of the building? That's what I really want to know.
Well, you know, people are going to take every chance they can to boo Roman, so I guess by proxy, Jinder will be liked.
I don't know. I think it more likely they're just going to crap on the match, and
well, probably, but you never know.
Well, this is kind of indirectly tied into our topic for today, and this is one that I really wanted to bring up because it's important not only for fans. It's obviously a big day for the company. News of a possible change coming for WWE's TV deal. That's the subject of today's show, and it'll be clear why we want to talk about this here momentarily. First, I want to get you some raw numbers out there. WWE share price earlier today, or I believe actually yesterday, closed at the highest it's ever closed at. Looking at the numbers right now, it's trading $49.74 a share. So it's down a little bit from what it was, but at the same token, still a good day on Wall Street for Vince McMahon and the WWE. That stock price increase has been driven almost entirely over the last 24 hours by the news that WWE is possibly close to reaching a new TV deal with NBC Universal. Now, if you follow Cage Side Seats, you've probably seen the early reports on this. The rumor, and it has picked up a little bit of steam here over the last 24 hours, is that NBC Universal is planning to pay upwards of 3 times their current rate to air Monday Night Raw on the USA Network. So it would basically keep Raw on Mondays on USA, and more than likely it would remain at the 3-hour mark that it currently sits at. The important part of this rumored deal is that it would not include SmackDown. So SmackDown would need a new home. WWE would ostensibly hold the right to shop SmackDown's TV rights to another network, possibly Fox. You could see it wind up on FS1. You could see maybe the new Paramount network through Viacom take care of it. You could see any number of things break down with SmackDown. But the goal here, at least if you're Vince McMahon, is to get this deal done for Raw and then try and get the most money possible for SmackDown. This has not been confirmed, but the speculation is definitely potent enough to drive up stock price, which has been climbing for several weeks now, thanks to some strong financial numbers from the WWE. Of course, we know the Saudi Arabia deal got a lot of money for them, and they had a very successful first quarter this year compared to last year. So, if you're WWE, things are looking pretty rosy right now. It's looking like all those investments they've been making over the last few years have paid off. Ryan, I'm going to get you to jump in here. As far as Raw on the USA Network, are you content with this move? Were you hoping that Raw would move, or are you pretty much indifferent to it?
I mean, it's what it is. I mean, it's always been on USA for me. I know it went to TNN for a while, but that never felt right. I don't know where else it could have really went. If it went to like Fox, I don't know if they would have dedicated their main channel for it, which it would have been nice if they did, been easier to watch it. But odds are SmackDown's probably going to end up on FS1, which I don't know if that's really going to hurt or help its viewership. It might keep it about the same because I don't know if you get FS1 compared to USA, but overall, I mean, it's just kind of a lateral move. It's good for them. They're even making buttloads of money off of it. So,
yeah, that's the important thing here as far as WWE is concerned. The bottom line is going to improve here because you're looking at the rights for Raw. Now, I think there was some ambiguity when this rumor first dropped yesterday that WWE may be getting 3 times the value of the entire deal, which does not seem to be the case. Now, if they had gotten 3 times their deal with NBC Universal was, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in the ballpark of $180 million per year, that would be an astronomical fee for Raw to get that much money. So I think and this has been alluded to later on, it's going to break down more whatever WWE gets right now to air Raw on the USA Network. That will be tripled. Now, that could be a substantial fee if, you break it down and let's say, and this is not any way correct, it's just speculation. But for the sake of argument, let's assume that $180 million is split evenly between running Raw and SmackDown. Well, that's, $180 million divided by 2. Raw's getting about $90 million. Or WWE's getting $90 million from the USA Network to put Raw on every Monday night. Well, 90 million times 3, that would increase their overhead right there, $270 million. So you're looking at, a substantial increase right there for Raw, and you still have SmackDown that you could shop around. Now, SmackDown by itself will not be as valuable as Raw would be packaged with it, but SmackDown still averages 2 to 2.5 million viewers a week and has a solid demographic in the 18 to 49 demographic range, which is what advertisers like. So that's still going to be an attractive carrot for a network to jump in here. You could see WWE command, anywhere from $40 to $120 million perhaps for SmackDown on another network. Let's just assume that they get on the middle range of that and say they're in somewhere in the 60 to 80 million ballpark for SmackDown's TV rights. Couple that with anywhere from 250 to 300 million for Raw. I mean, that's a huge increase in their current domestic TV rights fees. So, from a bottom line perspective, Vince McMahon is doing backflips today. WWE is really looking good. Now, here is some of the drawbacks for the fans. This is not a completely rosy picture if you're a fan of the WWE, and here's why. First of all, probably the most pressing, if NBC Universal is retaining Raw, then Raw is going to stay at 3 hours. And that was a major issue. A lot of people were hoping if the move to Fox took place, that Raw could be cut down to 2 hours. Because, of course, the Fox broadcast stations, they almost all have their local news broadcasting at 10 in the individual markets, and they're not going to preempt the news for SmackDown. So, or Raw, excuse me. So the broadcast would have had to have been cut down to 2 hours. With the NBC Universal, the 3 hour Raws seem to be here to stay. And Ryan, I don't know about you, but that's a disappointment.
Yeah, it is what it is. Hopefully SmackDown doesn't become 3 hours wherever it goes.
Yeah, that would be really, really catastrophic. I know a lot of people sometimes think that SmackDown doesn't get enough airtime and feels a little bit rushed, but 3 hours is just too much. It burns you out, and so that's really an unfortunate side effect of remaining with NBC Universal. The return on investment is just so high that you're sacrificing the quality of the show for profit. Now, if you're WWE, you have to make that deal. I'm not begrudging WWE for making the deal. You make as much money as you can.
Unless somebody's offering more, there's no reason for them not to take it. I mean, they'd probably be willing to go to 4 hours if they paid them enough for it. So,
exactly, it's all about the bottom line. And if WWE can make more money without, sinking their business, they're going to do it, and they have a responsibility to do it. That's one reason why I understood the pragmatic argument of going to Saudi Arabia. You have a responsibility to your shareholders to deliver, as much profit as possible. That's illegal. It's not just wishful thinking. That's what they're supposed to do. They have a legal obligation to their shareholders. So from a pragmatic perspective, I understand it. And I understand this move too. If they're getting 3 times the money to air Raw on the USA Network, then they got to take it, especially if it's the best deal out there. But at the same time, people like Dave Meltzer have talked about this at some length. WWE can make money despite the fans at this point. They have a core group of fans that are going to watch no matter what happens, and it does not matter what they see. They're going to keep tuning in. As long as WWE can keep figuring out ways to monetize their content, they're going to make money. And they're going to make a lot of money from the look of it. With the share price going up, that share price is only going to continue to rise, I would imagine, as more news about this potential deal with NBC Universal leaks out, or when they negotiate a new home for SmackDown and make some extra money on the side from it. I would imagine the share price is going to continue to rise because it seems, almost guaranteed at this point that WWE is increasing their income from TV fees. So, it's one of those deals where WWE is going to make a profit, and they're set up at this point where they're almost literally too big to fail. And that does great for their bottom line, but it also breeds complacency. WWE has a pattern that they follow with their booking. We talked about it a little bit ago with the repetitive nature of the angles that build up to a Money in the Bank or a Royal Rumble. WWE has found, a comfortable middle ground between innovation and stagnation. They put a few new people in play every couple of years, but the storylines are generally the same. We see it with Roman Reigns right now. He's in this anti-authority gimmick that's starting to pick up some steam. Well, we just saw that with Daniel Bryan a couple of years ago. We saw it, over the years with a lot of different guys, all the way back to Steve Austin. So it's not like WWE is reinventing the wheel here. They have a formula. They have the resources to hire pretty much whoever they want. They plug people in, and as long as WWE is keeping up, the 2.5 million to 3.5 million viewers on Monday night, Vince McMahon doesn't give a damn whether people really care about the product or not. Otherwise, it would have changed by now. And so, Ryan, we look at this situation. It's great for WWE's bottom line, but this deal may not be the best for fans.
It's just basically the ship is going to stay the course. That's what it's going to come down to. If you're unhappy with how it is, prepare to be unhappy with how it's going to be. They can always surprise you, but odds are it's just going to be more of the same moving forward.
Well, I'm going to ask a really weird question here because it kind of ties into the same topic. I mean, as a fan, obviously, we don't want WWE to just go away because that would defeat the entire purpose of this, exercise. But do you want WWE to succeed like it is, knowing that it gives Vince McMahon the go-ahead to continue with the status quo? It's kind of the catch-22 here. If you're a fan of the product, you obviously want WWE to do well because it enables them to do more stuff. If WWE was hurting financially, we're not getting another United Kingdom tournament coming up next month.
Well,
NXT is not touring like they are right now.
That's pretty much the nail on the head. If it wasn't for them making the money they're making, you wouldn't have an NXT. Because last time I checked, NXT doesn't operate out of profit. It's a loss for the company.
Yeah, it's a loss.
That could have changed, but
no, apparently they lose somewhere between 15 and 30 million a year. So.
Yeah. And to me, NXT is the best thing about wrestling right now, in WWE at least. But the more that this company succeeds, the more it's going to open the gate for other things to happen. For instance, New Japan is starting to come into America more often. They've hit the West Coast a few. They're hitting the East Coast a little bit this year. Your independents are going to be a little bit more successful. And side note, congratulations to the Bucks and to Cody Rhodes for selling out All In 30 minutes. That was impressive.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that here momentarily too.
Yeah. So, I mean, the more that the top company, which is WWE, the more that they succeed, the more options you're going to start getting below it. You're not probably going to get another WCW to come up. You're not going to get that big time rivalry, but we can see more wrestling to start show up, and we will start to benefit from it. Whether it's more NXT, more independent wrestling, or if more shows running in America from New Japan.
Yeah, you make good points there. It's a strong case, definitely. I think that, you have to weigh out what's more important to you. If you like WWE kind of dipping its toes into many different waters, then, you're really living the golden age right now. WWE has never been more broad and diverse than it is in 2018, between NXT, between their working relationships with other companies, especially in Britain right now, because the British scene is popping so big. The aforementioned UK tournament coming up. There's another Mae Young Classic coming up. They're pulling in workers from all over the world. Just in the last year, look at the influx of talent that they've managed to bring in. You have, of course, guys like Adam Cole, Ricochet, EC3, former Impact standout. You have all of the women that have been brought in for the Mae Young Classic. You're going to see some of them get hired, just like we saw out of the last tournament. You have international performers like Kairi Sane that have really come in and made a mark down in NXT. You see Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler, MMA's influence. There's a few other MMA stars that have talked about making the jump to wrestling. In the last 3 or 4 years, you've seen an influx of talent from places like New Japan with Gallows and Anderson, AJ Styles, Shinsuke Nakamura. Even before that, you saw Finn Balor, the former Prince Devitt, and the former Kenta, Hideo Itami. The cruiserweights have, really come to life here in the last year or so. 205 Live has been stagnant a little bit, but, the division is kind of turning around under new leadership. You've got some important pieces down there in NXT, like Johnny Gargano and Aleister Black. They look like they could be stars for the company. There is a big-time push to diversify the product, and that's only possible if WWE has the resources to put it all together. So, on the one hand, WWE's success is the fan success. There's quite a lot of enjoyment of watching the UK tournament or the Mae Young Classic. You know, a lot of people enjoy watching NXT on a weekly basis. The takeover specials are some of the best wrestling shows on the WWE network. You know, you go through the library, you're not going to find many shows that match the quality of takeover, to say nothing of the qualitative streak they're on. You know, there really hasn't been a bad takeover since maybe Fatal 4-Way back in 2014. So, you know, you're looking at a company, or maybe it was 2015, 2014, 2015. My timeline's a little bit off. I think it's 2014 for takeover, because our evolution was towards the end of 2014. But you know, the bottom line is, you know, you see all of this content WWE's putting out, and that's good. You know, WWE's success gives you all of that extra content. Here's the downside, though, and I think it's a significant problem. WWE's main programming is the engine that really drives the ship. If the main programming is no good, then everything else that kind of comes along with the package, it doesn't mean nearly as much. The UK tournament is nice. Don't get me wrong. I'm looking forward to seeing how that shakes out. I love watching NXT. Takeover was one of the favorite shows I've ever been to live. I enjoyed Takeover more than I did WrestleMania, to be quite honest. The experience was just better overall. But the main programming of WWE is why I pay attention. That's what really drives my interest as a fan. I love NXT, but I don't love NXT as much as I do the WWE. And it's maybe nostalgia talking, maybe it's just, you know, big fish, little pond scenario. I don't know. But a lot of people share that sentiment. If Raw and SmackDown are not good, if the main roster's creative direction is lame, then it kind of lessens the enthusiasm for everything. And plus, you also have to consider, when the main roster's bad, interest goes down. When interest goes down, that means less interest for the side projects, and that means, you know, with less eyeballs, there's less of a rationale for WWE to start doing these shows. You know, if the UK tournament, you know, craps out, nobody ends up going or nobody watches, they're not going to keep doing them. You know, ditto the Mae Young Classic. Now, maybe the Mae Young Classic is a little bit more secure because of the PR aspect, but, you know, you're getting to a point in the main roster where people aren't just angry anymore, they're apathetic. People don't leave during the main event of Backlash because they're mad. They leave because they're apathetic about it. You know, we saw some people leaving at the main event of WrestleMania, but far more people just stayed around and just kind of showed ass in the crowd because they were angry. You know, the crowd was kind of angry to start the match during Roman Reigns and Samoa Joe at Backlash, but then they just kind of gave up. You know, when you get to a point where the crowd turns apathetic towards your product, now you're in a real dangerous territory, because the more apathetic the crowd becomes, the less interested they become. And the less interested they are, that's when interest goes down in the product and you start seeing some real problems. So you have to weigh the pros and cons here. WWE making money like they are without having to put on a good show, you know, that has some rewards for the fans, but it also carries an enormous price tag. And I got to be honest with you, your view may differ. You know, I'd love to get your take on it. I don't know that sacrificing the quality of the main roster is worth all of the extra stuff WWE can do right now. I really don't.
I mean, it's, if you're unhappy with what they're doing now, then yeah, you're screwed. They might change. If it really is going to come down to us, and when I say us, I mean everybody that's watching. If we're truly unhappy with it, we just have to change the channel. If their ratings tank, then they're going to change stuff. But if we sit there and we keep watching, like we do week after week, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. And that's fine, I guess. It's because it's working. But I like being able to see the other things. I like 205 Live. I like NXT. I like the Mae Young Classic. I like the Cruiserweight Classic. I like the UK tournament. I'm probably going to like the new UK tournament. I'm going to like the new ones. If I didn't have those, I wouldn't watch anything at all. I wouldn't watch Raw and I wouldn't watch SmackDown. I wouldn't watch the pay-per-views. But it's these other things that I get excited to see because I watch NXT. I watch the people come up and I can see them on the main roster. And yeah, the track record is not great, but it's still good to see them. You get that little bit of, maybe it's similar to when you watch college football compared to the NFL. If you follow a college player and you see them move up, you can see what they do. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But I like the whole package. If I'm missing one thing out of it, then it kind of just makes me not like any of it.
Yeah. It's really in the eye of the beholder, I think. And like you were kind of alluding to, you know, there's people have different interests. You know, some people may not like NXT. Some people may only like NXT. It just depends on your interest as a fan. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's all subjective at the end of the day. But you know, it is unfortunate, I think, that, you know, we can't have our cake and eat it too. It would be a tremendous experience, and I've been waiting for this for almost 4 years now. The big knock, kind of the running gag online, is that whenever TakeOver and the WWE main roster put on pay-per-views back to back, in other words, TakeOver will have a show the same weekend of a major WWE show, the TakeOver event almost always eclipses the main roster show. And that's not to say all the main roster shows are bad. It's just TakeOver just has a reputation of being more exciting than the main roster counterpart. And when we were heading into WrestleMania week down in New Orleans, we talked about this here on the show. We looked at TakeOver, we broke it down, we looked at the card, and we thought this is probably going to be an exceptionally great show. But we also looked at WrestleMania and said, you know, if everything on this card delivers, this could be an all-timer. I want to see a point in time where the main roster product is as hot, or at least as good, let's say, as the NXT product. And, you know, you're not even, again, this is a qualitative argument, so it's all subjective anyway, but, you know, there's just something to be said about what NXT can do, free from the same constraints that any other promotion of their size has to worry about. And then you compare that to what the main roster does. It's just night and day. The main roster is full of the same stories, the same matches, the same stipulations. It's just recycled over and over and over. Whereas NXT, you constantly see evolution, you see change. And that's as much a part of the system as it is their storylines. I don't want to give complete credit to the storylines. Obviously, when people are getting called up to the main roster, yeah, you're going to have roster turnover, so you're going to have change. You know, but let's not fully discount NXT's writing either, because NXT, they could have easily fallen into the same trap WWE has. Just running characters that have the same basic story over and over and over. And to their credit, they haven't really done that. They've tried to tell different stories. They've had different people on top. Shinsuke Nakamura was not Finn Balor. Finn Balor was not Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn was not Neville. You know, there's a progression at work here where you see NXT kind of evolving, changing over time. And whether you look at their champions, whether you look at the different groups that have come through, whether we're talking tag teams or factions, like with the current Undisputed Era, there is growth, there is change, there is something new from NXT that kind of gives you the interest to keep going. It sparks that desire to see where they're going to go next, because on some level, even though you know, given NXT's track record, it's probably going to be a fantastic show, you know, you have this expectation that there's going to be something new. There's going to be something bigger and better on the way. You know, everybody thought when Shinsuke Nakamura came in that, you know, that was, oh my, you know, Shinsuke Nakamura, great wrestler from New Japan. That's probably the best NXT could ever really do. Well, now they come out and they raid Ring of Honor for guys like Roddy Strong or Adam Cole. They take guys like Ricochet. They stockpile the system full of talent. NXT's got one of the, you know, most robust rosters they've ever had right now. Some with homegrown stars, some with indie talent. But, it's like the sky is always the limit for NXT. You never know where they're going to go next. And that is exciting as a fan. I mean, you can hear the passion in my voice about it. NXT gets me excited because I know that you're getting quality. And that, that aspect of the main roster is lost. It does not exist on the main roster anymore. And that, I think, is a problem. But it's a problem that WWE doesn't have to solve because there's no real need for them to solve it. They're going to make money. They're going to stay profitable. And at this point, if they're profitable, why take the chance of shaking things up when, there's no guarantee of success? It makes more sense financially for WWE to stay in this rut. Whether they even see it as a rut is debatable. There's one report out that said Vince McMahon saw the fans leaving during Backlash as eye-opening. Was followed up a week later, people saying Vince McMahon didn't give a shit about it, that he expected it. I would imagine the latter report's probably true, because if you haven't expected fan apathy and anger at this point, you're really stupid. So, I just don't know. I really wish we could get to a point where the main roster felt as fresh and exciting as NXT does. And this was what NXT was supposed to do. It was supposed to build new stars for the main roster so that you could constantly have a fresh supply of talent. That only works if you treat the stars coming up from NXT as big deals. But guess what? WWE blows through those at an alarming rate. There's only a handful of guys on the main roster right now that are anywhere near, or women for that matter, performers, let's say, more accurately. There's only a handful of performers right now on the main roster that have mirrored their level of success in NXT on the main roster. You have one or two that may have had a little bit more success, like an Alexa Bliss or an Elias. Everyone else is worse off now than they were down in NXT.
I was going to say most of your women's divisions from NXT, if you really think about it. But when it comes to the men's competitors, and they dropped the ball on most of them.
Well, let's take the women for a second. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Let's look at the women from NXT. Okay, let's count off the big names. We don't have to go through every single. Now discard groups like the Riot Squad and Absolution, because number one, Mandy Rose, Sonya Deville, Ruby Riott, Liv Morgan, and Sarah Logan, they didn't have, these huge colossal runs in NXT. They haven't really done much on the main roster yet, but they didn't really do much in NXT. And they
are from NXT, though. I mean, you can't discount that fact.
No. I know that. But what I'm saying is they haven't been on the main roster long enough to know what they're going to be.
No.
That we don't know, how big they're going to be because they haven't been around long enough. And there wasn't a lot of work from them in NXT to compare it to. So they're kind of wild cards. But, look at the Four Horsewomen. Let's take the Four Horsewomen. You could make the case that Charlotte has, whether or not she's surpassed her level in NXT, she's definitely kept an even keel.
Yeah, she's either the same or better. She's multiple-time champion at this point, and she's one of the most, let's say, strongly pushed, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I would say that, Charlotte is a success story.
She's always at the top of the
right.
division. So she's fine.
Yeah, Charlotte is a success story. Now let's look at Bayley. Could you realistically argue, even though Bayley has won the Raw Women's Championship, is Bayley better off now than she was in NXT? I would argue no.
Bayley is in that weird position where she spent most of her time in NXT being the underdog, and it just did not work when they tried it again up on the main roster. Yes, Bayley is worse off than she was, but for the majority of NXT, yes, she was over with the crowd, but she did lose a little bit early on in her NXT tenure. It wasn't until the back end where she started feuding with Sasha Banks that it started to pick up for her.
That is true, but I don't think we can discount the length of her reign compared to the rest of her NXT run, because again,
she definitely was the one that dropped the ball the hardest on.
Herein lies kind of the conundrum. Did they mess up more on Bailey or did they mess up more on Sasha Banks? Because here's another person that you could really argue had a better time of it in NXT.
Here's the thing you got to keep in mind. Sasha Banks is recently fallen down the totem pole. There for the longest time, her and Charlotte were the only two people of note on Raw for the women's division. She had a big run with winning the title back and forth. Granted, they hot potatoed it, but she was pretty much one of the main women for a long time in Raw. It's just here recently that she's kind of fallen back down the card a little bit. She had a great run.
Let me ask you a question. You mentioned the hot potatoing. Does the fact that Sasha Banks never had a successful title defense ever not diminish her a little bit, or does the fact that she kept winning the championship overshadow that?
Because it makes it to where the two of them were pretty much even.
I disagree, because Charlotte was kind of established at the end as being superior because she's the one that left with the title at the end of their little series. Now, this is what was so weird about that booking. This is why it's so confusing on Sasha. I mean, she was a big deal with Charlotte for a while there. You can't dispute that. But the fact that she never had a successful title defense, she's a 4-time champion, if memory serves, or 3-time champion. Lord, I can't remember at this point. It all runs together. But
I want to say it was 4.
Say what?
I want to say it was 4.
Yeah, it's either 3 or 4. It's somewhere in that ballpark. But, no matter what, no matter how many times she won the title, every time she would win it, she would lose it her very first defense. She never had a successful title defense. She never had a successful title defense on pay-per-view. And so it's just a matter of perspective here. If you just look at the accomplishments, the record book says she's a 4-time or 3-time women's champion. That looks good. If you look at what happened during those reigns or how she was booked before and after, it looks a little less good. And it's really kind of up in the air over whether or not you think that her accomplishments on the main roster can beat out what she did in NXT. We can't really lose sight of the fact it wasn't just that she had a memorable championship reign down in NXT. That was a revolutionary reign. What Becky Lynch to an extent, but what Charlotte, Sasha, and Bailey did in NXT cannot be understated. We lose sight of that now because time has kind of dulled it a little bit, and the knowledge that their main roster runs have been wildly different. It makes us lose sight of the fact that they were really revolutionizing the game down in NXT during that run. And I don't know, dude. I'm hard pressed to say Sasha has had a better run of it on the main roster. Because I think that NXT title
run on the main roster, what I'm saying is that she's not been as destroyed as everyone makes it out to be. She's having a little bit of a downturn right now, but it's not saying that she's dead forever. She didn't have it bad the entire time she was on the main roster.
Let's put it on point then, with the caveat that you're right. I mean, her main roster career is not over with. We don't know where she's going from here. But if you had to take the cumulative run on the main roster and put it against her cumulative run in NXT, was NXT's run for Sasha Banks better than her WWE main roster run?
It was, but I'm not saying she's had a terrible main roster run either.
No, that's fine. I understand that. But the overarching point we were trying to make earlier is people who are better off in NXT than they are on the main roster.
Most people are going to be better off in NXT. Just that's the way NXT is presented. It helps it out.
And that is the problem. That's
also the fact that Raw is 3 hours a week, SmackDown's 2 hours a week, NXT's 1. So you see less of the people to begin with. So it feels a little bit bigger when you do see them. But
that begs an entirely different question. And that is, we know the WWE has a content problem. Or let me rephrase that. They have to put out so much content each week. 3 hours on Mondays, 2 hours on Tuesdays for SmackDown, plus another hour, 45 minutes to an hour, somewhere in that nature for 205 Live, and an hour of NXT. NXT is kind of isolated down in Orlando. It's its own thing. But with so much content, WWE has a very large main roster, but there is a decided lack of initiative with a lot of them. And put another way, they have a lot of people that are just kind of there. Why does WWE not focus on getting more of its talent exposed on TV? Exposed in a good way, like get them TV exposure, not expose their weaknesses. But why doesn't WWE better utilize the roster? They know they have 3 hours to fill, so why are there so many scrubs on this roster that don't mean a damn thing? Wouldn't it be prudent with so much time to fill to try and make more star power? More stars out of the talent they have?
You're gonna run the risk of burning out the people that you do have, though. If you do that, it's bad enough that we see some of these people as often as we do. Like, you watch NXT, you don't see Aleister Black and Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa every single week. You might see them more often than other people on the roster, but it's not a match every day, every time you see them on. They're not always going at it. But if you're getting rid of the lower card people or people that aren't as important, then you're just going to oversaturate too much. You're going to get Roman Reigns in 7 segments every day compared to the 5 you get him right now.
Whoa. I think you misunderstood what I was saying.
I might have.
I'm not saying get rid of the lower card guys. I'm saying use them more. Like, okay. I'm saying you have, let's take, for example, Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder, the Revival. We know that they have the ability to talk a little bit. They're not bad on the microphone, and we know they're great workers. Why can't they have a feud on Raw with another tag team? Like, what's stopping WWE from putting the Revival in a little undercard feud?
Honestly, in their specific case, I know you're being more general.
Yeah,
they're their own worst enemy because they kept getting hurt.
Okay, well let's get past them and let's look at maybe someone like an Apollo Crews, who's pretty much been relegated to a background player for Titus Worldwide. Why is Apollo Crews just kind of stuck in middling tag matches? Why can't he have an undercard feud with somebody? Or let's take Tyler Breeze and Fandango. I mean, they were doing the Fashion Police stuff on SmackDown to great effect. Ever since they came over to Raw, it's pretty much been nothing. They're just sitting there. What about the Authors of Pain? The Authors of Pain feel like they were called up and they didn't have a purpose at all. It's like, and it's not just the lower card that, this happens to. Look at Bobby Lashley. Bobby Lashley has kind of just been there on the main roster yet. When he might turn into something, the whole vignettes with his family or whatever, maybe that's setting up for some elaborate heel turn. I don't know, but Bobby Lashley hasn't exactly done a whole lot. Baron Corbin hasn't done much. He's feuded with No Way Jose, but therein lies the thing they need to be doing. I wouldn't say Baron Corbin should be wrestling with a lower card guy like No Way Jose necessarily, but at least the thought is correct. No Way Jose and Baron Corbin have a little feud developing. Bobby Roode and Elias have a little feud developing. It's not always about the top tier guys. You need your Roman Reigns. You need your Seth Rollins. You need your Miz's or your AJ Styles or your Nakamura's, but you also need mid-card guys like a Baron Corbin or an Elias or a Bobby Roode or
I'll be honest. Like, these mid-card guys need more time to shine. I agree with you there. And I think they might start trying to use them a little more because I feel like here recently, as you were saying with Baron Corbin and Bobby Roode and No Way Jose, they've started trying to. But at the same time, and this is a concern I have when they initially did the shakeup and I was looking at the rosters, I don't feel like the roster is as big as people think it is. The roster, for a weekly 3 hours on Raw, you're going to be seeing the same people a lot.
What hurts at one thing? I don't mean to cut you off there, but I'm glad you brought that up. You know what really hurts? One of the premises of the initial brand extension was that the cruiserweights would help fill some of that void.
Yeah.
They have an entire roster of people that they don't use on Monday nights. The cruiserweight division has pretty much disappeared from Raw almost entirely, but the cruiserweights are technically part of Raw. even though they come on Tuesdays after SmackDown. It's like you have an entire division that you're not really using except on 205 Live, and apparently not many people are watching 205 Live, so it's like, why aren't you filling the gap with the Cruiserweight title feud? Why is Cedric Alexander and Buddy Murphy not having segments on Raw to build up to their title defense coming up in 2 weeks? It's like, you have tools available, you just don't use them.
I think it's the catch-22. I think they're afraid if they show them more on Raw, you're going to have less people turn into 205 Live than they already have now. It's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of scenarios, I think, but it's still annoying.
What do you think is more important? And I'm saying this not from the business perspective, because obviously Raw is going to be more important than 205 Live. There's no doubting that. But
yeah,
what's more important? 205 Live having success on Tuesday nights on the network, or using that division to help pad out Raw and keep it from feeling so stagnant?
It's really, they're about even if you, however you want to look at it, because they want 205 Live to be something that's going to draw subscribers to the network, which is another one of their big sources of income. I think instead of using it to kind of further the 205 storylines, why not push some of your 205 people into your mid-card acts? Have some of them go up against Seth Rollins for the Intercontinental title. Have them, have a couple tag teams from 205 Live show up and go for the tag titles. Don't just say, well, this is for the Cruiserweight title necessarily, but, still give the people something to do. And that way, it's like, oh, I really like Hideo Itami and Akira Tozawa as a tag team. Maybe I'll check out 205 Live to see them more.
Well, let me ask you this then, and this is kind of the same vein. It goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago with NXT. There are people that get called up from NXT that are not ready to be called up.
But a lot of people.
I don't think anyone would really argue Alexa Bliss was not really ready to be called up for the role they had in mind for her. She's a great talker, but she really wasn't ready in terms of her in-ring work when she got up to SmackDown.
Still not, I would say.
She's better than she was.
I think
she's better than she gets credit for, but Nia Jax wasn't ready.
There are moments I watch Alexa Bliss, and it's just like she's afraid to take a bump. It's kind of the same. I mean, I can nitpick my way through a lot of the women's division. Like, Nia Jax is sloppy in the ring, and she's not really good on the mic. She probably should have stayed down a little bit longer.
Dana Brooke would be a no-brainer. Dana Brooke did not belong on the main roster. She should have stayed in NXT to get more seasoning. We use Dana Brooke as a non-controversial point of topic here. NXT, there are plenty of people that get called up before they're ready. Okay, we recognize that. But the reverse, I think, is also true. You have a lot of talent in NXT who are staying down in NXT, not so much because they need to, but because, Triple H and whoever's in charge of NXT want some draws for the brand. NXT has become a victim of its own success, in my opinion. It has a reputation for delivering this amazing wrestling content, and so now they feel compelled to go out and get as much talent as possible and put on the best shows possible. But let's face facts here. NXT, at the end of the day, is not making money, nor is it designed to. It's a loss leader. NXT exists for one reason and one reason only. Okay? If it gets people to subscribe to the network, bully. That's a bonus. If people go out to the takeovers or live events, bully. That's a bonus. But all of that is secondary to its primary purpose of building a pipeline of talent for the main roster. If it's not doing that, NXT is effectively worthless, even though we love it as a fan.
No, okay? Let's take a second. You're talking about people being mistreated, but you can't go to that side of the coin without looking at the other. Look at a lot of their top people on the main roster right now and see where they came from. Seth Rollins, NXT. Roman Reigns, NXT. Alexa Bliss, NXT. Charlotte, NXT. You got a lot of people that did come from NXT that if it wasn't for that, there's no telling what we'd have right now.
But that's exactly where I was about to go. NXT has produced some stars. How many people in NXT right now need to be in NXT? Put another way, there's a lot of people down in NXT who are main roster ready right now. And the question becomes, why aren't they on the main roster? Is NXT and its value and its, its kind of hipster cred that we have among online wrestling fans, is that worth keeping people off the main roster? Because I got to be honest with you. As much as I love Johnny Gargano in NXT, and as much as I know in my heart of hearts, they're going to find a way to ruin him on the main roster. Johnny Gargano has no business being down in NXT still, other than to sell tickets for NXT. Tommaso Ciampa has no business down there. Aleister Black, no business. Adam Cole, Ricochet, EC3 even. You have an entire... Lars Sullivan is probably borderline, okay? But you have an entire crop of talent down in NXT that really could be on the main roster tomorrow and not miss a beat.
Well, it's not also just for the matter of these people being ready to come up and it's hurting them staying down. They're also down there to help the other people that they're down there with.
That is a salient point. And
it's not just because you don't see, say, Gargano wrestling some of these other people on TV, on the tours that they do, and then in the performance center and everything else, they still work with the other wrestlers. So it's a matter of, yeah, you might have some veterans that are down there that don't need to be there, but would somebody like Velveteen Dream still be as good as he is right now if he didn't get to work that program with Aleister Black? If Aleister Black had gone up already, then what? That's what you kind of run into in that situation as well.
It's a salient point, and it is a good point. It's a very strong point, actually. I think my question kind of becomes, where do we draw the line? Like, you definitely need that veteran presence in NXT. And it's kind of funny to think of someone like a Johnny Gargano as a veteran, even though he's only 30, but he's been wrestling for so long, he is a veteran, compared to someone like a Patrick Clark, who's only 22. So you're right. You need that veteran leadership in the locker room. But, where do you draw the line? Is Johnny Gargano of more value in NXT, helping bring people along while moving tickets for NXT, than he is on the main roster, where he could be, the next Daniel Bryan? I mean, let's be real here. Johnny Gargano has a huge groundswell of natural support, and it has nothing to do with the fact that he's an NXT guy. Johnny Gargano has all the intangibles of a Daniel Bryan type performer. Great in-ring worker, handsome, photogenic, can cut a good promo. He's an underdog that people believe in, but he's also a wrestler with a cool nickname that people think is cool. So he checks a lot of boxes. Johnny Gargano, in a perfect world, could be the next incarnation of a Daniel Bryan. I'm not saying they should do the same storyline with him, just that type of wrestler, that kind of mold. Johnny Gargano has a lot of intangibles that could make him a very healthy star on the main roster. So, where do we draw the line? Where is his value truly lying? If it's down in NXT like a Cassius Ohno, obviously he's going to be better in NXT in this player coach role. A Johnny Gargano, an Aleister Black, a Ricochet, I start to lean towards they really should be on the main roster because they have more value to offer the company there. But, it's just, it all boils down to the same problem with the main roster. You have so much time to fill, but their time management is just so god awful. It's not even funny. They're leaning right now on guys like Seth Rollins to go out and wrestle 20-minute matches each week just to fill time. And God bless Seth Rollins for it. I wanted to talk a little bit about him today, and we kind of went down the rabbit hole on the business front. But, Seth Rollins is wrestling out of his freaking mind right now. This dude is on fire. I am terrified to think of what could happen if Seth Rollins gets injured or leaves for a few months to film a movie or something. Because right now, Seth Rollins, for my money, and this is just my opinion, Seth Rollins is the only thing worth watching Raw for. I don't even think Braun Strowman is worth watching Raw for at this point. Braun Strowman has been knocked down a few pegs. I still like him. I still think he's got a lot of potential to be a big star. But right now, it's Seth Rollins or bust for me on Raw. Without Seth Rollins, that show is done. So, I don't know what your thoughts on Seth Rollins are, or whether you agree or not, but
I mean, that's just your opinion. I mean, I like Seth Rollins a lot. I like Finn Balor. I like, there's other people I like. It just, for every person like you and me that likes Seth Rollins, there is somebody out there that hates Seth Rollins. There's people out there that don't like the way he wrestles. You gotta, appeal to those people too. So you're going to get that little bit of disparity in it. And a lot of the reasons, going back to the people being down, if you put Johnny Gargano up on the main roster right now with the style that he's wrestling and the matches that he wrestles, he'll be done in a year. He can't keep doing that kind of matches that we keep watching from him on a daily basis. He's going to get watered down, and then people are going to say, well, he's not as good as he was in NXT. And that's through no fault of his own. It's just the way it is. You're going from a brand that has, a couple shows every now and then, a tour, and it's not really that much travel in between where they're touring, to I'm on the road 5 days a week, wrestling 4 matches. People are gonna change.
Well, then let me hit you with a $64 million question, because we're keeping with the same thing that we've been wrestling with, whether NXT, whether the value is in NXT or whether, it's counterproductive with the main roster being the ultimate goal. Is NXT in its current incarnation, the way it's set up, a disservice to the main roster? Because everything you pointed out is absolutely correct. The talent is not working nearly as many hours per week as the main roster is. There's not nearly as much exposure, so they're not being burnt out as quickly in NXT as they are on the main roster. There's only 4 or 5 takeovers at most in a given year, whereas there's 12, 13, 14 pay-per-views, not counting network specials they may run. Is NXT set up, in such a way that it's really best serving the main roster? Because when you look at it from that perspective, the argument can be made NXT is counterproductive to its original goal. Because guys are, having the time of their life down in NXT with all of these great feuds and having this, huge run of quality that they can't possibly sustain on the main roster. But that inevitably has the result, the perception becomes they're not as good as they were in NXT. And so they lose something on the main roster. So maybe it's NXT structure that's hurting them more than anything. Maybe NXT needs to evolve.
It's nothing different than it's just basically the same as NCAA versus NFL. You've got your college players that go to the NFL and they become all-time greats, and we've had that with NXT. You got Seth Rollins, and then you've got your college players that go to the NFL and they were never as good as they were in college, and you got that too with NXT. We should stop looking at NXT as a supplemental setup for the main roster and just start looking at it as its own thing. There's people that come in NXT that will never go to the main roster, and they'll have success in NXT, and vice versa. There's people that have been in NXT that didn't have any success, and then they went to the main roster and they had all the success. It's going to go both ways, but we should really just look at NXT for what it is. It's a different brand that, honestly, I think is fun to watch, and that's just what we should consider it. You're going to see people come and go. It's going to have its downs. It's going to have its ups, but why do we have to sit here and say, well, it's not really all that great, or the people that go up aren't worth a damn anymore? Just enjoy it for what it is.
That's perfectly, you can do that. That's perfectly fine as a fan. And on some level, that's what we do because we are fans of NXT. I'm not saying I'm not a fan of NXT. We wouldn't have gone to TakeOver if we weren't. So, as you're absolutely right. You have that right as a fan. But, I'm also a fan of the main roster. And the main roster right now is a dumpster fire. If there's a way to make the main roster programming better, I want them to do it. And, NXT is supposed to be one of the ways that helps improve the programming. I'm just posing the question, maybe the structure of NXT is counterproductive to that goal, because NXT is set up to outshine the main roster in a lot of different ways. Now, am I saying that NXT should intentionally be sabotaged for the main roster's sake? I'm not saying that, because now you're going too far in the other direction. If you destroy NXT, Well, now you have no pipeline, and you're back to, the same problem you had from 2005 to 2010 when you didn't have a true, developmental league anymore. And that's one reason why there's such a dearth of people from that era. Before Florida Championship Wrestling and NXT kind of became a thing, and after they broke off with Ohio Valley, it's like an entire lost generation where they weren't really developing anybody. So you don't want to cannibalize NXT. I'm not even making that case. But I do question whether NXT needs to be altered in some way that makes the transition more amenable for its talent. Because while you are absolutely unequivocally correct, there will be people that get it and have success on the main roster. There will be people that don't have success on the main roster. And there will be people that never even make the main roster. The college analogy, it works here. But I also think that the attrition rate on NXT call-ups is higher than it should be. Because I think there are people who are more talented than their main roster really conveys. And that's not necessarily because of the time constraints. That's a matter of poor writing and poor creative direction. And so if there is a way that we could transition people out of NXT to the main roster and give them a better chance of success, I think that's worth exploring. And I say that both as a fan of NXT that doesn't want them to tinker with it too much, but I also say that as a fan of the main roster programming and want that to be better. At the end of the day, NXT doesn't have to make a profit. The main roster does. Without the main roster, there is no NXT. So, it's like you said, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Where do we draw the line? Is it worth keeping our little fiefdom untouched and enjoying NXT for what it is? Or do they need to make changes to try and improve the main roster? And that follow-on question, is there a way to change it without ruining NXT? There's tough questions. That's a deep rabbit hole to go down, Yep.
You can ask what ifs all day. There's no telling. Honestly, the way it is right now, NXT's fine. Main roster's not as fine. The main roster, I feel like, would be worse off if it wasn't for NXT, because half the people that are worth watching in the main roster, they're from NXT. So really, will they change and something will be different in the meantime? Hopefully, but until then, we'll just keep watching and see what happens.
Yeah. And, it kind of begs the question, does Vince McMahon see the quality of his product as being bad right now? There's two trains of thought here. Either he recognizes that the quality is down from what it used to be, and he doesn't care, or he doesn't recognize that the quality is down. Now, I don't like the argument that, they're profitable, so it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter from a perspective, because they're profitable, yeah. But I don't buy into the argument, even though I mentioned it myself earlier, that WWE is invincible. They're too big to fail in the sense that I think the WWE is always going to have a footprint, at least until Vince sells. As long as Vince McMahon is alive, I don't see the WWE ever just utterly collapsing. But they're not invincible. They can be dinged. And I see the initial wave of problem developing here with this sudden wave of apathy. You have a growing sense of apathy, and the ratings and the social media numbers have been going down the last month, and at a faster clip in 2018 than they were 2017 or 2016. So obviously there is some attrition here on the audience that's kind of evaporating a little bit. WWE's about to sign their new TV deal, but the TV deal does not necessarily guarantee them a free ride here. There has to be some sort of obligation to maintain viewership to a certain level. USA Network is not going to pay them $270 million a year to broadcast Raw if Raw is only averaging 300,000 viewers. And I'm not saying they're going to drop to that. I'm just saying, there is some realistic expectation that you have to maintain viewers to a certain level.
Yeah, just because they're going to be making a lot of money off the deal doesn't mean they're going to have to be able to sit back and do nothing. At the end of the day, if the product is getting down the tubes and their ratings are gone, then they're losing money from advertisers. They're going to lose money from network subscribers. They're going to lose merchandise money. They're going to lose gate money from people coming to the shows. So they got to keep performing well. They're not going to sit there and start half-assing it. If they start dropping further and further than they are now, they will change. They're not just going to stay the course and be terrible forever.
Right. I think my question, and this is the question that we've been asking for years now, is, is Vince McMahon content to be where he's at? Because the Vince McMahon of old would have probably taken his mentality in 2018 as an affront to his sensibilities. I think Vince McMahon used to pride himself on delivering the best possible product. Now, his idea of what the best possible product is can be dramatically different from wrestling fans. I'm not saying that Vince has always been in touch with, the desires of his audience. If anything, he's often been, running counterproductive to the audience more often than he has been tuned into them. But when Vince gets in sync with his fans, magic happens. Vince recognized what America was looking for in the mid-'80s. He recognized Hulk Hogan's appeal to fans. And he rode that gravy train for 9 years, and he rode it to enormous success. He recognized that Steve Austin was getting over with the crowd in an organic way. He tapped into that Austin 316 movement, and my God, did it pay off. I mean, it won the Monday Night War. It let him go public. It made him a freaking billionaire. Vince McMahon can connect with the fans, or at least he has that capacity to in the past. I just wonder, if he lacks that capacity now because he's too old to continue to connect, or whether Vince recognizes, things aren't so good qualitatively, but there's no sense in upsetting the apple cart because we're making money and things are pretty stable. That's the real question. But that's a question that also can't be asked or can't be answered. It's all conjecture, so. We'll have to leave it at there, I guess. Talk a little bit about All In right quick before we sign off for today. I know we went a little bit longer than we had anticipated going, but All In, that's the other big news of the week on the wrestling front. Sold out in 32 minutes, I believe it was.
I believe it was 29 and some change.
Okay, yeah, so right around the half-hour mark. They sold out, the 10,000-seat arena in Chicago. I think I forget the name of the building, but it's not the big arena. And it's not the Rosemont Horizon. But,
Sears Center.
The Sears Center, thank you. Yeah, they sold out the Sears Center. 10,000 seats. Now, there was a little bit of hubbub online that most of the seats, or I shouldn't say most, but a portion of the seats were picked up by scalpers.
That's going to happen. I mean, there's nothing you can really do about it.
Right. You can't really, avoid that. But I think something that a lot of people missed, they assumed, secondary groups like StubHub or whoever, scalpers, they picked up all of these tickets and they're going to resell them. So they really didn't sell out. Okay, that's the general consensus from the crowd who seems to be not so impressed with this. But at the same time, there's a reason why those secondary ticket sources picked up those tickets. Now, we don't know how many tickets they picked up. Some say it's as little as a couple hundred. Some say they might have been a couple thousand that these sites picked up. But it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because there's only one reason why they're picking up the tickets at the frequency that they are.
Everybody wants to see Flip Gordon.
You asshole. I was going with they have interest in the show.
Yeah.
They have interest in this show. It's a trending topic in the world of wrestling. There's buzz about it.
Here's the last thing I saw. It was the first non-WWE event. I want to say they said it was in 20 years to sell more than 10,000 tickets. TNA hasn't done it. WCW didn't do it in the last years of their life. So it's a very big feat for a group of guys that aren't a company to just get together and do this. It's very impressive. And it's indicative of what wrestling fans are like nowadays. A lot of people are starting to be more open to the whole um, independent scene and watching New Japan. A lot of these New Japan people coming in is probably what got a lot of people help sell tickets. So it's really great for them, and I'm really happy for them.
Yeah, I mean, you can't discount the success that they had here. They had a vision, they worked at it, they signed a bunch of people for this card, and you know what? It paid off. They're going to sell out that building. Now, whether it's full or not, you know, I'm sure on a personal level they want it to be full, but whether it's full or whether there's 8,000 people in the building, you know, they still sold it out. They're going to make the money from it. And good for them because, you know, the more success they have, it's the more success wrestlers can have on the independent scene. And the more success people can have, the more that people are going to jump into the independent scene. And that's how you get new talent to come in. You want to siphon off people that would have went to boxing or MMA or, you know, any of the other big sports. If you can siphon them off into the independent scene because there's money to be made there, that's more people that WWE can draw from in their pool, or New Japan, or Ring of Honor. You know, it filters all the way through the wrestling landscape. So, you know, on that level, it's great. As a fan, I'm not a big Cody Rhodes fan. I think he's dramatically overrated, and I'm not a huge fan of this Bullet Club stuff that's been going on. You know, I kind of feel like it's a downgrade for Kenny Omega to have been involved in it. But I'm very selective when it comes to Kenny Omega because I'm a huge Kenny Omega mark. So I'm not even going to pretend to be unbiased.
Well, they have announced the first. I think they only in first match they have announced what it's going to be. I don't know if you know what it is or not.
The only match that I've heard announced, as far as I recall, the only match that has been announced is the NWA title match between Nick Aldis and Cody Rhodes.
Right.
Which, you know, I mean, I'm glad that it's not a Kenny Cody match because I didn't really want this storyline to drag out any more than it has. And you know what? I know the NWA title was defended on a, if I'm not mistaken, a Wrestle Kingdom show or a. No, I don't think it was Wrestle Kingdom. I can't remember. It was one of the early shows last year that Rob Conway defended the NWA title. I'm wanting to say it might have been in Sakura or Osaka. I can't recall for sure. But the NWA title has been defended on big shows in Japan over the last few years. The New Japan's kind of put the NWA title out there. But to my knowledge, this will be the first time that this will be the first time that the NWA title has been defended in front of this many people since the golden age of the NWA.
Which is a good thing for NWA if Billy Corgan's trying to get it going again. Just going to get really eyeballs on him again.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, you know, it's like, I'm not a big Cody fan, but I love the Bucks. I'm a huge Young Bucks fan. I know I kind of accidentally blew up their Twitter feed a couple weeks ago by reporting misinformation, so that was kind of embarrassing. But I'm a Young Bucks fan. I want them to succeed. I'm happy for them. I'm glad they sold it out. I hope that they have more shows like this, you know, because the more shows they do that are successful, the more, you know, companies will try to imitate it. And in an age when technology, social media, and online streaming make it easier to follow companies than ever before, you know, the more wrestling content we have, the better. Because like we were saying earlier, you know, we're not necessarily getting, you know, our jollies from the main roster programming, but at least we've got NXT. You know, at least there's Progress or New Japan or these new independent shows coming out or Shimmer. You know, or if you are into lucha, there's avenues where you can find good lucha. You know, there's wrestling scenes that are popping in different places in the world. And the world is a smaller place than it's ever been before, thanks to the wonders of social media and the internet. So, yeah, the more people succeed in wrestling, the better for the fans, because the more wrestling content you have, the less excuse you have to bitch about it. And by God, we've done our share of bitching over the last few weeks. I'd like to have a week where it's just nothing but wow. Can you imagine how great this week has been? It would be nice.
You're Captain Negative, so I doubt it'll happen.
And on that note, I think that's going to do it for this week.
Yeah, probably.
Ryan, any closing thoughts you want to leave the viewers with?
More of a home thing. The Carolina Panthers finally have an owner.
Yeah, I noticed that, and boy, oh boy, was the opinion divided on that. Seemed like a lot of people wanted the guy from Charleston, Ben Navarro, I think his name was.
The problem is that guy didn't have the money, and he was probably going to move the team to Charleston.
Yeah, I noticed that. He was trying to get a stadium built down in Charleston, which...
They couldn't get a soccer team. They're not going to get a football team.
Well, yeah. Well, it's, I mean, I'm sure that the desire to pull the NFL to Charleston was a little bit stronger than a Major League Soccer team, but it leaves in question still how that would have worked out financially. It's an interesting little, bullet we dodged. Obviously, it's in the name, Queen City Express. We both hail from Charlotte, and we're both Panthers fans, so we want the Panthers to stay in Charlotte, obviously. But you know what? As much turmoil and upheaval as there's been in the organization, as many scandals have broken over the last 6 months to a year, if this guy, now he does have like a set of brass testicles that he keeps on his desk, so I feel like it's only a matter of time before, he steps into a big pile of shit himself. But hey, he's been in the NFL for a while, minority owner of the Steelers. He apparently wants to implement that same type of philosophy here in Carolina, which if it delivers a couple of Super Bowls, then, bully. But I'm more interested in the product on the field than I am the ownership. As long as we don't have an owner that, sabotages the team, I don't care who got the bid, as long as they have a commitment to winning and keeping the team in Charlotte.
Short of us becoming a team that moves or becoming the new Carolina Browns, I mean, we're probably going to be better off than we were.
So. Adam Rice, that one's for you, buddy. We're never going to sink to that level. I offer my sympathies to you and your team. I mean, hey, Cleveland could be a playoff.
Would you rather me say the Carolina Lions? Because
Cleveland in the playoffs, that's funny. I would rather just be the Carolina Panthers, the team that pretends like it has a shot every 5 years. This is the Queen City Express. We're going to go ahead and sign off here. Got a couple of plugs, obviously. The Connoisseurs of Wrestling, we're going to continue our run with Bobby the Brain Heenan this Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern on the YouTube. Be sure to check out the live stream. A big thank you to everybody that's been following the show so far. The Shooting the Breeze podcast with Taker's Minion and Mr. Doc Senju drops every Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Eastern on the weekends of Big Four shows. So be sure to give them a listen. The best fun you have with your clothes on all week. All of the affiliated podcasts from Cage Side Seats, including Metal Matt's Ruthless Aggression Era podcast that drops Friday evenings. The Violent Wrestling podcast with my life partner Mox and Ambrose Alley that drops sporadically. A couple other shows that are on hiatus right now but should be coming back soon. Be sure to be on the lookout for William Fitzpatrick's new material. That should be dropping here soon. I think he's got a show lined up in a couple of weeks. Definitely we'll get some more information on that as we get a little bit closer. Be sure to check out Cage Side Seats, the daily and nightly threads, all sorts of great content, discussion. Angel being Angel. Love you, Angel. Pretty much wraps it up here for this week's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Please continue to not listen. Let me get that backwards. Please listen. Please continue to listen. Wow, I butchered that up all to hell, didn't I?
Good job on that one.
That was not subliminal. Well, maybe it was reverse psychology. If I tell people not to listen, maybe more people will tune in. Hell if I know. I'm tired. It's ready for me to kick off here. I am Biff Kensington for Ryan Sayo. You've been listening to the Queen City Express. We will catch you next week. Same time, same channel with a brand new episode. Have a good one, guys. Take care.